you fine. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. How do you
Okay,
spell?
ladies
Go ahead.
ladies and gentlemen, our gentlemen here wanted to introduce each other, but I pushed the button to start the broadcast, so we started the stream. Maybe we should give them the chance to introduce them to each other. Olsi Jazexhi was my comeback guest. He was here for the topic of remind me, Olsi, what did we see? About the Jared Kushner and Kosovo and Serbia in the White House admitting Israel or something like that. That was our topic, wasn't it?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, Dr. Jones, he was my guest for 3 times now. Thank you both, guys, for accepting my invitation. Tonight we will talk about Islamism, the right to insult the Muhammad, and the beheading of Samuel Paty, history teacher in Paris suburbs, and this will be basically our discussion. Maybe in the beginning, Olsi told me that he was yesterday on Albanian national television, and they had this discussion about the right to insult Islam or Muhammad. How did the conversation on your national television go?
Well, I mean, we had opposing opinions. We were in a TV program called Spotlight here, where we had some people who, of course, they are francophones and they defend any kind of stupidity that the French regime does in the world. And of course, there were people who were opposing it. For your viewers, I want to remind them that Albania is a Muslim majority country. And as a Muslim majority country that we are those of us who are Muslim were very sensitive. We have also a large group of Catholics and Orthodox Christians here. And our Ottoman heritage have taught us that we should tolerate each other and we should not insult each other. So what the French are doing with these caricatures, where they want to humiliate their Muslim citizens, is an open insult that the French government is doing not only to its Muslim citizens, but even to Muslims who do not live in France and do not feel well with this arrogance of blasphemy that we see coming out from Paris.
Dr. Jones, did you hear? Did you read anything about this event in Paris with the beheading of the history teacher, and before that about Charlie Hebdo thing? Do you have any opinion on this topic?
Yeah, I think we have to identify what's going on here. So let's go back to the beginning. 2005, Fleming Rose, who is the editor of Hilland's, I don't know how to say it. I don't speak Danish. A Danish magazine, visited Philadelphia in the United States and met with a man by the name of Daniel Pipes. Daniel Pipes is the son of Richard Pipes, who was a professor at Harvard. Daniel Pipes is a professional Muslim basher. He has some type of organization in Philadelphia. He's a Jew. He's part of that Jewish Zionist propaganda machine in the United States of America. He's written a book on conspiracy theories in which he basically says anything that we don't like, or anytime you expose something we don't want exposed, you're a conspiracy theorist. Now, he wrote an article in the Jerusalem Post denying what happened, but it seems pretty clear that 1 year after that, after meeting with, after Rose met with Pipes, the cartoons came out in the Danish magazine. Now, magazines are always in need of money. The Jews in the United States, the neoconservative foundations, are notorious for buying up magazines, and this is a way to gain support from for a magazine that doesn't make money. Now, in order to understand what's going on, you have to talk about the Jewish involvement in this controversy. Jews love blasphemy. Let's be honest here. It's one of the favorite things they do. The Jews have taken over the art world in the West. A man by the name of Saatchi has basically turned art into either pornography or blasphemy. And now they're involved in what I see as a deliberate provocation of the Islamic world, because the United States at this point was failing in Iraq and it was losing support on board. And so this is the way for the Jews, for the neocons, to reignite support in the United States among the Christian population by making Muslims look bad. So the first attack took place in Denmark. Big uproar all across the world. And then Charlie Hebdo, this is now, what are we talking about? 15 years later? No, 10 years later. Charlie Hebdo decides to pick up the Danish cartoons. Well, I guess they were running out of money too. This is another instance of a deliberate political provocation in France this time, not in the United States of America, because again, this whole alliance, this whole NATO alliance in the war against Islam is starting to fall apart. So we need another way. So Charlie Hebdo was spectacularly successful because it got 12 people killed, which is exactly what they wanted. And then there was a huge demonstration in France, and all these posters, Je suis Charlie Hebdo, bumper stickers, big marches, Angela Merkel, Macron is involved. This is pure, and Macron then comes out and says the Frenchman has a right to blasphemy. He has a right to blaspheme God. Well, this is outrageous. No one has a right to blaspheme God. Okay, so what is he saying? He's trying to say, I'm a defender of free speech. Well, this is pure hypocrisy on his part, because this summer, okay, just in the run up to this thing, okay, the run up to the murder of the man here, I was supposed to give a speech in September. I was supposed to speak in Lille, and I was supposed to speak in Paris. In Lille, I was supposed to speak with Hervé Risson, and in Paris, I was supposed to speak with Alain Soral. Both of those men are in jail now. They have both been imprisoned because of hate crimes, hate speech, which are a purely fictitious crime. Okay, they are both in prison now because Macron is a tool of the Jews, and the Jews wanted these people thrown in jail. So I'm bring this to a conclusion. We're not talking about the French here. We're not talking about the Americans. We're talking about the Jewish, the Israel lobby, and all of its supporters deliberately trying to provoke animosity between Christians and Muslims.
Do you have any comment on this, Olsi?
Yes, I agree with Dr. Jones. The thing is like this. I mean, Emmanuel Macron is a very unpopular French president. He has domestic problems in France. The economy is in crisis. And moreover, there is another problem when it comes to French international politics. France is losing its position that it had a long time ago in the world. The French, because they followed NATO and Americans, they lost their influence in Syria. Today, Syria is in a way an Iranian and Russian protectorate. France is losing also in Azerbaijan in the conflict of Nagorno-Karabakh, where France has openly sided with Armenia against the sovereignty of Azerbaijan. France is also losing in Libya. And when we see the Mediterranean, France feels in a way under pressure from the growing influence of Islam and Muslims in the Mediterranean. Because of the stupid policies of French politicians who do not take their orders and do not look after the national interests of France, but who are being played by powerful Western lobbies. Let us, for example, take the example of Emmanuel Macron. He's a puppet of the Rothschild family. He was a banker for the Rothschilds, and they promoted him. He was nobody in France a few years ago. They promoted him, they created for him a party, they made him president of France. But now he's failing. He's having local riots at home. We had the yellow vests who were protesting against his regime. And on the other hand, when we look at the Mediterranean, France is losing the influence that it had. France and Macron tried to play the kingmaker in Lebanon a few weeks ago, but he failed because the influence of Iran and Hezbollah is very powerful in Lebanon, and France cannot act as a colonial master with the Lebanese. France is losing in Libya because thanks to the Turkish intervention in supporting the government of Tripoli, the dictator that France was backing in Libya, General Haftar, he lost the battle. And as I mentioned, even in Azerbaijan. So today in the Middle East, we see two rising Islamic powers. They are Iran in one side, which is supporting the axis of resistance. And on the other hand, we have Turkey, which is showing its ambitions. France tried to blackmail Turkey when it came to the issue of the gas and the conflict between Turkey and Cyprus and Greece and Israel. And Turkey showed to Israel, to Cyprus, Greece, but even France, that we are ready to defend our national sovereignty. France tried to make the kingmaker in Lebanon, but they also lost. And on the other hand, when we come to the domestic French politics, today Europe is under a massive Arab invasion. Why? Because of what the French politicians do, people like Sarkozy and others, who went and bombed Libya, who went and destroyed Syria. And what is happening now? When you go and burn your neighbor, the fire is going to come home. And the ancient regime or the old laicist elites of France, who are very anti-religious, for people who know the history of France, France has been one of the most vicious anti-Catholic regime in Europe since the time of the French Revolution. They killed priests, they destroyed churches, they destroyed Catholicism. And now what they're seeing that while they, in a way, managed to finish off the influence of Catholicism in Europe, now they're seeing that Muslims who are coming from the countries that they are burning are very proud about their religion, and they do not want to accept the fake values of French laicism. On the other hand, what is happening is because Macron is having internal crisis in France, the French people hate him, nobody wanted to vote for him. He's trying to play the extreme right-winger in order to appease some parts of the French electorate by showing to them that, look, we have problem with the economy, we have problem with the coronavirus dictatorship that we are having installed throughout Europe, but I'm the good guy who I'm going to fight your Arab and Muslim neighbor who lives in the same building with you in Paris, in Marseille, or whatever. So they are trying to provoke a fake conflict within France. Macron said a few weeks ago that Islam is a religion in crisis and it needs to be reformed. The question that we as Muslims have for Macron is, who the hell are you to teach us what Islam is and why Islam needs the reform? Probably Macron is dreaming and is imagining himself to be some kind of Robespierre and to, in a way, to copy and repeat the crimes that French Masonry did against the Catholic Church. But as a matter of fact, I believe that Macron is failing. He's trying to provoke an internal conflict in France by provoking Muslims, by insulting Prophet Muhammad, in a way to save his own future political career.
Any comment, Dr. Jones?
I think that's right. I think that Macron has been in a state of crisis ever since the beginning of the Yellow Vest protest. COVID was a way of suppressing that protest, forcing people to stay at home, get off the streets. It looked like a second chance for the oligarchs in France to reassert their will over the people. But now, when he endorses blasphemy, okay, he's giving cover to the people who created this incident. And I think he is now trying to exploit it. He's cracking down on mosques throughout France. He's arresting people. He's trying to campaign for the upcoming election. I think what Olsi said is right. He's trying to be out Le Pen in terms of spreading animosity toward the Muslim population. It's all an attempt to stay in power. The question is, how is he going to succeed if he's going to alienate everyone? He's alienated basically, you're seeing the tail end of the French Revolution, the tail end of the Enlightenment, the laïcité, the laicism, the secular government, basically coming in contact with religious belief and incapable of dealing with it in any effective manner. So banning the burqa, not the burqa, the hijab, banning the hijab in public, doing this type of intervention, and also alienating the Catholic population for the interest of a small group of people. It's not going to work. I just don't see it succeeding over the long haul.
There is something else that I believe we should mention here for our viewers, is that Macron is not himself. Macron, if we see at his personal life, he is a person who has been victim of pedophilia. I mean, he had a relation with his teacher, who nowadays is his wife, when she was 37 years and he was 15. And later on, he went to marry her. And after this, working for the Rothschild family, he has been a puppet of powerful Jewish bankers in Europe. So, I mean, in a way, I have to support what Dr. Jones is saying, that he is not himself. He's a puppet of big international bankers who, I mean, since after the era of Jacques Chirac, they have taken over France, and France is no longer the French Republic, which was proud about its identity, which was following the philosophy of de Gaulle. Nowadays, France is becoming, in a way, a third world country. And people like Macron are exactly the puppets that these powerful international bankers bring in power in Europe. Here in Albania, we have our Prime Minister, Edi Rama, who is also the product of the Soros and Rothschild lobby. Macron is the same. These people, they're puppets in a big game that is being played against us, people of Europe, and Muslims and Christians. They are who create conflicts. In one time they attack Catholicism, they attack the Catholic Church, and we have seen the crisis that the Church is having nowadays. The Vatican is afraid to defend Catholicism as it must, and on the other hand, we see them using their armies on destroying the Muslim world. So we're having a mutual assured destruction that they're doing between Islam and Christianity. On one hand, they use people like Sarkozy or Macron to wage wars in the Middle East, to destroy the civilization of Muslims. Nowadays, when we see millions of Syrians, Libyans, Afghans, Iraqis who have landed in Berlin and in Paris and throughout Europe, these people did not come because they don't like their countries, but they came there because these powerful international bankers, people who sponsor wars in the Middle East, destroyed their home countries. And now these people have gone in the West. On the other hand, what is happening, this massive refugee invasion of Europe has another intention behind it, and that is the destruction of the Christian heritage of Europe and the ethnic groups who have historically made Europe what it is today. So they're putting Islam against, or Muslims against Christians, and both parties are being destroyed. On the other hand, when we hear the propaganda of the French regime, which nowadays has started a fascist offensive against its Muslim communities in the name of defending the teacher Samuel Paty, they are making all this big propaganda. They're claiming that these Islamists, they're coming and they're killing our good teachers. This is a fake propaganda for a number of reasons. Number one, we do not know why was Samuel Paty killed. We do not know what were the intention of his killers. But what the French regime is doing, they're doing a big propaganda throughout Europe in order to scare and convince the Europeans and tell them, look, guys, you forget all the crises that we have, you forget our corruption, we have an enemy that is Islam and Muslims. On the other hand, they are defending the blasphemy against the Prophet of Islam, but even against Jesus Christ, in the name of freedom of thought and in some values which are not true. While in France, the French regime of Macron is claiming that they have freedom of thought and freedom of speech and what have you, you have many draconian laws where you can end up in jail. You cannot joke with the Jews in France. You cannot question Holocaust. You cannot even question the so-called Armenian genocide. We know there are many people, historians, comedians, like you have this Dieudonné Mbala, people who in the name of art, they try to mock and make satire with different groups of people in France. But for the French regime, you are allowed to insult the Muslims, you are allowed to insult Jesus Christ, but you are not allowed to have or to make comedy with your Jewish neighbors or your Armenian neighbors as well. What is this thing showing to us? It shows that we have double standards. Christianity and Islam have to be targeted. Muslims and Christians, they have to be insulted. But then when it comes to this powerful group of people, be them the Armenian lobby or the Jewish lobby, you go to jail, even if you want to make satire with them.
Yeah, just adding one thing there, I agree with you. During the Yellow Vest protest, there was a BBC reporter standing in Paris, and he's ready to give his report, and one of the Yellow Vest protesters runs in front of the camera and he says, Macron pute juive, Macron the Jewish whore, and then he runs off, and the man is very embarrassed. That came right out, a kind of spontaneous explanation or explanation of what was going on, the deep grammar of what was going on. The problem here is that the group in power is a very small group. It has a lot of money, it has a lot of influence, but it doesn't have a lot of people. And so you have, once again, this conflict between representative government, the majority of the people, and a small oligarchy that controls the discourse through social media, through all the big tech giants. And once this group gets exposed, once it becomes a general understanding, I mean, we didn't talk before we came here, and yet we're both seeing the same thing. This small minority, this Jewish minority, totally in control, and a regime of complete hypocrisy being put in place to serve its interests. So you can put a crucifix in urine, you can make you can draw cartoons of the prophet, but you can't criticize the Jews. You just can't do that. You can't even say what the Jews say about themselves, or you will go to jail. This is not going to last. This is not the basis for a social. It's not going to work over the long haul. That's the crisis right now.
From the point of view,
but I mean, in the short haul, the point I'm trying to make here is: will they be successful in generating this type of armed conflict, this type of rioting in the streets that we saw in the United States? This is precisely what's happening here right now.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard it happened. It was supposed to happen. I have doubts about this event, but it was supposed to happen just a couple of days after the murder of Samuel Paty. I never heard of anything like that. Two European-looking women were supposed to stab two Muslim women because Muslim women asked them to take their dogs on a leash, to have their dogs on a leash. Is this precisely the type of news, or maybe even fake news, that's trying to build on this tensions that have obviously bursted out after the murder of Samuel Paty? Will there be many such fake news in France right now? Just to what do you think?
Well, we have incidents now. For example, in Michigan, there was a plot to kidnap the governor of Michigan. This plot was exposed 2 weeks before the election. When you look into this plot, it was discovered by the FBI. Okay, now there are 14 people were arrested, but 4 of them, we don't know who they are. Well, what's obvious now that the men are being arraigned for trial, is the FBI was behind this. They created this plot in order to spread terror through the population and animosity toward what they're calling white supremacists. This part of the problem here, and we've been in on this, you, Alish, you and I, because we've talked about this whole white guy phenomenon. What is a white guy? Who are these white guys suddenly appearing in Europe? We have Frode, who's a Norwegian, a Lutheran Norwegian, who suddenly announces that he's white. We have Tom Sunic, the Croatian. He's announcing that he's white. What you're seeing is a movement of basically that exposes the collapse of identity among the various European ethnic groups. They're fleeing. And what I'm talking about here is the religious identity of these groups of people. The French have a religious identity that is traditionally Catholic. Okay. What you're seeing in these other countries is Protestant countries, for example, Scandinavia and England, where the Protestant church has simply evaporated. It has no influence anymore. And in these countries, whiteness is replacing what used to be Protestantism. I think that's what Frody was telling him. Pretty much, we talked to him about this. He admitted that he was a Lutheran. He was baptized. He's a Christian, but he doesn't identify as a Christian anymore. Now, if it goes to this type of thing, you're coming to an inevitable type of conflict, it seems to me, because they are saying we can't change being white. We're being replaced by these groups of people. We're going to fight with them. And I think these people are going to be weaponized in the same way in Europe that they're being weaponized in Michigan by intelligence groups in order to promote violence and conflict.
But from the point of view of average, I don't know if there's even an average French guy right now, but average French guy 20 years ago that was probably Catholic, and he sees all the Arab Muslims coming to France, and average German Hans sees all the Arab Muslims and also Turk Muslims coming to Germany. On one hand, it seems that it came in waves. First wave was to say to European nations, to Catholic nations, to Christian nations, you should accept Arab Muslims because they're refugees, and if you don't accept them, you're bad people, and Christians were not supposed to be bad people. And now it seems that the second wave is coming, where the conflict will be staged. So there are enough Muslims now in Europe that the conflict can be staged. Would you agree with me, or is this too simple?
Is the question for Dr. Jones or for me?
For both of you.
Well, there are certain groups in Europe, they are very powerful, who they, time after time, they make use of what Samuel Huntington called the clash of civilization. And these groups who happen to support the Israeli fascist regime against Palestinians, they do benefit from these wars. They have economical benefits, but they have even geopolitical benefits. We know, for example, the story of 9/11. 9/11 was a setup. It was, there are many people who do not believe that it was the Muslims who did it. But if we see the byproduct of it, and if we see who benefited from it, it was neither the Muslims nor the West, but it was Israel. So there are always attempts on framing the Muslims in the West, on showing them as the black sheep, as the enemies within, against which we have to fight. And this is something very dangerous. I believe that the greatest player in all what we witness nowadays happening in the West is Israel. Netanyahu, Dr. Jones, he's an American. Netanyahu nowadays is more powerful than even the president of the United States. Everybody is afraid from the Israeli regime. The American government is afraid of them. The French government is afraid of them, and they all try to please them. If you study and see what is happening nowadays in the Balkans, where we come from, we see how the influence of Israel has grown so much that for us, people who were free from such influences during the era of communism or before, we are so surprised. Now, they play the war of divide and rule. They try to put Westerners against Muslims, Muslims against Westerners. And we know very well the story. ISIS was created by Western intelligence services, and it was Israel itself who was hosting and who was helping and who was supporting these different terrorist organizations. They were planted in Syria. When we see a person with a Muslim name doing an act of terrorism in the West, we have to, first of all, be smart enough and understand that it is not Islam and Muslims who are doing it. But we have to see the larger picture. Who is benefiting out of it? And even the question that we have nowadays about the caricatures that we're having being displayed and supported by the government in France. Somebody is trying to provoke the Muslim community. On one side, we have the French government, which is doing all it can to provoke and insult the Muslims. And on the other hand, we have people in the West who are very eager and waiting to see Muslims become suicidal and terrorists. Because this is the whole project, the whole plan. They want to kill our coexistence. They want to humiliate religion. They want people, be them in the Muslim world or in the West, which once upon a time was a Christian, to convince them that religion is bad, religion brings fanaticism, Muhammad, he is an evil person, Jesus is an evil person, and only we are the good ones. This is a war against our common civilization, against our common values. Us in the Balkans, for example, because in the United States you do not feel that very much. Since the collapse of communism, we had US government and different American state agencies who have very aggressively promoted the agenda of LGBT. One of the first things that USAID did in the Balkans after the collapse of communism was teaching to the people of Southeastern Europe the concept of family planning. And what was the reason behind of it? They wanted to kill our families. They wanted to kill our tradition. And you see, in 2012, I was at University of Toronto, a Monk Center. We had one of the directors of Soros Foundation who came and delivered a speech to different intellectuals and academicians who were there. And you know what this gentleman told us? He told us, we want a world without nationalism, without tradition, and without religion. So these are the three pillars that these supranational elites, if I can call them like this, they try to impose on the rest of mankind. Number one, they use terrorism to demonize and destroy religion. They destroy and attack religious symbols. They bring puppets like Macron or like Edi Rama that we have in here, who are both products of powerful bankers, people like the Rothschilds or like Soros and what have you. These people are being installed in power. These people then are being promoted and are pushed to make wars. And what we see today is a total mess. We have the destruction of humanity, what we are seeing with our own eyes. And moreover, nowadays we live even under the dictatorship of coronavirus. These supranational elites are using the fear of a virus to close mosques and churches. People are forcefully prohibited in the United States, but even for us here in the Balkans, from praying to God. Never in the history of mankind have we seen such kind of dictatorship. Even in our biblical or Quranic stories that we have about, let us say, the dictatorship of the Pharaoh against the Israelis, or the violence that the Quraysh, the pagans of Mecca were doing against Muslim believers, we have never seen the violence that these globalist elites are doing against religion today. So the caricatures of France the provocation of Muslims, I think that they are part of the same agenda. The agenda is attack against religion, showing that religion is bad, is evil, it produces terrorism, and we don't need religion. I don't know what Dr. Jones thinks about that.
I think you're right. I agree with what you're saying. I was in Qom in Iran. I was having a discussion with one of the mullahs there. The discussion was not going very well. We were just talking past each other, and there was a break in the discussion. And I went out on the balcony, and then another mullah came out with me, and he said to me, he said, "We don't want to convert people like you." He said, "You're a believer." He said, "What we want to do is we want to work together for peace until the 12th Imam returns with Jesus at his side." So I said, that's what I want to do too, because we need to avoid these conflicts, because we're constantly being thrown into these conflicts for the benefit of other people. The question is, how is that possible now? Is it possible for normal people to understand how they are being manipulated, how their groups are being manipulated to produce conflict? Now, I lived through something similar when I was a boy in Philadelphia. I went to high school a mile away from where Benjamin Netanyahu went to high school. He didn't go to high school in Tel Aviv. He went to high school in Philadelphia. He's an American. He knows how to manipulate Americans. But my family moved from an ethnic neighborhood that was Irish to a suburb which had no denominational, it was just mixed up Americans because of the black migration that was being orchestrated from the southern states of the United States. Now, these people were not foreigners. They were citizens of the United States. They were Christians as well, but they had a different color. And because they looked different, they were able to be used as proxy warriors of the oligarchs against the Catholic population of Philadelphia. Now, if I could go back in a time machine, I would like to go to those people and try and explain to them who was manipulating this, because I know who was doing it now, because I wrote a book on it. It's called The Slaughter of Cities. But no one was there to explain this, because no one understood it at that point. And the people on the ground were confronted with violence. You know, it was black gangs versus white gangs or Catholic gangs in the city of Philadelphia. What we have now, I think, is a higher level of consciousness than we had then. I think we understand what is going on now. The real question is, will we be able to continue to talk about this and try to explain this to people? Will we be banned? I think one of the main reasons people are being banned from the internet, I've been banned from Facebook, is because you cannot identify the source of the problem. I talked about here, George Soros, the Jewish lobby in America, Daniel Pipes, these people. As soon as you identify the problem, you get banned. But I just can't help but feel optimistic about the rise of consciousness, because we come from completely different backgrounds, and I think we have a common understanding of what's going on in the world right now. And that's important.
What do you think, Olsi? Are you optimistic too?
Well, I'm not very optimistic, because I think we're living in a new era of digital dictatorship. The closing of YouTube channels, of Facebooks of people, removing books of personalities like Dr. Jones from Amazon, shows that we're living in a new and a very scary medieval age. These global elites who are against the free speech and free intellectuals, they want to silence any person who does not agree with them. For example, me myself, I have my Facebook profile closed for 30 days for a posting that I made. And in my posting, I was criticizing Emmanuel Macron, and I was showing that his laicist regime is crazy with Islam. And I was showing how France is failing in the Mediterranean, and how these bankers who have Macron on leash are using him to attack poor immigrants and refugees who live in France, and to make a new fight, which is nonsense for the French people. And only for writing this thing, I was banned from the Facebook for 30 days. I mean, if in the medieval ages we had the process of auto da fe and book burning, we're living in a new era of massive censorship and dictatorship. For example, what we see nowadays, the forceful closure of mosques and churches and closing people inside their homes under the excuse of COVID-19. This is an era of a modern medical military dictatorship. The global elites, they want to control everything, what we do and what we say. They want us not to believe in God. They want us not to believe in tradition. They want us not to believe in who we are, but they want us simply to be individuals. And when we dare to differ with them and dare to question their narrative, we're being immediately banned. So this is a new Big Brother era, where these global elites, they're not allowing freedom of speech. What is the difference between what they're doing now and what was happening in medieval regimes before?
Wait a minute, I know the difference because in the Middle Ages you actually had the book go on trial, and you were actually were allowed to present your case. You're not allowed to present your case to Amazon. Amazon
Exactly.
just shuts you down. You have no appeal. And I think
with the Facebook, they don't allow you.
Well, Facebook is now starting to get sensitive, I think, because they've established what they're calling a Supreme Court, where you can appeal your ban from Facebook. So these people are starting to feel that their hostility on the part of the average person that they're not used to. That's what's happening now.
Not only this, but I know from my personal experience here in the Balkans, Facebook is behaving, is cooperating with the police. They are not only acting as a thought police against people, but we have many people who, when they go to court, our court systems here, they cooperate with Facebook, and they even read the police, the personal communications that people have with whomever they want. So, we live in an era of digital censorship and dictatorship, which was not possible before. Because let us say in pre-modern ages, people could differ and could disagree with the authority, and the access of the authority to the people was limited, because in the pre-digital era, you could insult the people in power, you could oppose them, even in your circles, and the big brother was not there. But today, the big brother, the big hand of these people who happen to be Israelis, most of them, they control and monitor us in every step with the phones that we have, with this camera that we have. For people, let us say, who have seen the movie Snowden or whatever, we're being watched, listened every moment of our life.
Right.
And this is something that never happened.
No.
In Islam, we have some Islamic prophecies. Prophet Muhammad said that before the end of the time, there will come a person who will be called the big liar, the big manipulator. The term in Arabic is Dajjal. And according to these Islamic prophecies, Prophet Muhammad says that when this Dajjal will come, he will be somebody will have only one eye. And many Islamic scholars think that the phones that we have, the computers that we have, with the cameras that they are exactly what Muhammad prophesied 1,400 years. And the prophecy goes on and says that in this time, this big liar will cheat the world. It will tell to mankind that he is their savior, and people have to follow him and to reject God. And this is what this totalitarian dictatorship where we live in today is trying to do to people. For example, let us take the example of the coronavirus lockdowns. In times of crisis, since when mankind came to this planet, the first thing that humans did was seeing towards the sky and praying to the mighty power, which we call God. But what is happening, and we witnessed that in Albania from March to May of this year, we had our mosques closed. People were prohibited to go and pray to God. Christians were prohibited to go and pray to God. And what was the excuse? The excuse was the safety. So these globalist elites, they always speak in our name. They claim that they love us. They claim that they care for us. They claim that they want to save us. So they have invented this myth of the coronavirus. And they tell us, look, if you speak about God, you'll be in danger. If you pray to God, you'll be in danger. If you doubt our narrative about the danger of coronavirus, you will be in danger. So we are here to save you. And what they did do to us, they silence us, they prohibit us from socializing with each other, they provoke conflicts against religion. And the final aim of these globalist elites is that they do not want us to be Christians and Muslims anymore.
Guys, I think we can, if you're okay with it, maybe we can have a short Q&A session. If viewers, we have currently more than 100 viewers. If they want to ask you guys questions, then maybe we can have a Q&A session.
Yeah, sure, that will be fine.
Guys, you can ask questions to my guests.
While we're waiting for a question, I'd just like to add one thing. A friend in St. Louis who went to the new Amazon warehouse in St. Louis, just directed. He said, you go in there are thousands of workers. There are 17 different languages that are spoken in that facility alone. And during lunch, no one could talk to each other. Everyone's sitting at a table and they're all looking at their cell phones. Because this is the future. This is the future, the globalist future that the globalists have intended for us. No one can talk. All information comes through the cell phone. 17 different languages, minimum wage, low wages. That's the story.
Oh, there's one question coming. I don't know if I understand it. I hope you do, Dr. Jones. Is taxonomy the logos of biology?
Taxonomy, as I understand it, is the breaking down of animals into species and genera and things like that. No, it's not. I would not say that that's the logos of biology.
Okay, please ask Dr. Jones if he's still making videos after his YouTube ban. His YouTube videos were excellent and very inspiring.
Yes, the videos will be posted. You can go to culturewars.com. They're posted there. We're also going to post them on our Facebook page.
Great. Maybe I can tell you an anecdote of mine. I did a social experiment this week. Instagram. refused to erase the picture on a profile with the name "Support Black Art." They had a picture of two fat black naked women holding two beheaded white or European looking heads, and they refused to erase it. And then I went and published on my minor Instagram profile. I published Red Sonja character with a head of a black woman, of a beheaded black woman, and in 2 days, Instagram sent me a message that they were erasing my my picture. It's an interesting anecdote. Okay. Olsi, what is your thought on Darwin? Darwin, Francesca's asking, what is your thought on Darwin? She's not buying it.
Well, the thing is this. The so-called conflict between religion and Darwinism, I believe, was made for political reasons in Europe after the era of Renaissance. The aim was to attack religion and to show that religion is against science and what have you. Now, for people who read the Quran is I can call it is a book that is not against science. For example, God says in the Quran that He created seven skies, and there are 6 other planets like Earth. So, I mean, if you see the history of Islam, you will see that this religion has not been in general against the science, and at times, let us say in the eras of the Abbasid caliphs, Muslims became the front runners of science for our planet. Now, coming back to the question of Darwinism, in Islam we have a great scholar, intellectual. His name is Ibn Khaldun. So Ibn Khaldun lived in the 15th century, if I'm not wrong about that, and he wrote a very famous book, which I would suggest to all your viewers to read it. That book is called Al-Muqaddimah. Al-Muqaddimah in Arabic means the introduction. And this book was in 3 volumes, which was part of a much larger books that he wrote, which was about the history of the world, how it was conceptualized by Muslims. And coming back to Al-Muqaddimah, if you read Al-Muqaddimah, Ibn Khaldun speaks about the evolution. And Muslim thinkers and scholars from the medieval ages and even after, they believed that the species, they evolve. And in Al-Muqaddimah, Ibn Khaldun, who was the grand Qadi of Cairo, of Egypt, he shows how in our planet there are different types of species and how they evolve when they go higher and higher from the ground. So coming back to the theories of Darwin about the evolution of species, this is something that is accepted in Islam. In the tradition of Prophet Muhammad, which are the stories that Prophet Muhammad said, we in Islam know that human beings have not always been looking the same like we are today. For example, people in the time of Noah or Nuh, according to Islam, they were much taller and they lived longer than we live. So what does this thing shows? This thing shows that our species, they evolve and they change according to the context where they live and to the conditions. So the theory of evolution is something not rejected in Islam. But the problem is that the militant secularists, especially the French and others, who attacked the Catholic Church in the era of Renaissance and after, because they had a personal problem and hatred against the church, they tried and put the blame on the church by trying to portray religion, God, and church as enemies of science, something which is not true. So coming back to your question, I would say that Darwinism is perfectly okay with Islam for as long as it does not reject God, and for as long as Darwinism is not being used for political reasons by the anti-religious elites of the world in order to attack religion. I mean, Darwinism is a science. No science is perfect, but, and we in Islam, we do accept that human species and other animals, they evolve and change with time, but this does not mean that we have to reject the chief architect of our existence, God.
Since we're all here, I know that Catholic Church has never had any scientific or philosophical, metaphysical problems with Darwinism, or at least theory of evolution. But do you have any original thought on this topic yourself, Dr. Jones?
Yes. First of all, we have to distinguish between Darwinism and evolution. Darwinism is an atheistic ideology. If the only problem with evolution comes about when you exclude God from the universe. If there's no God, then evolution is God. If there's no God, then evolution is impossible, because all that Darwin says is that which is comes from that which is not. That's the essence of Darwinian evolution, and it's impossible. That which is cannot come from that which is not. Now, we have evidence of evolution, okay? In nature, if you look at a seed, it evolves into a tree, an acorn evolves into a tree, but that is only because the possibility, the potentiality has been put there by God in creation. You cannot get around the fact of creation, no matter how hard you try. And all of we went through this about 10 years ago with the new atheists, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Daniel Dennett, all these people stood up there and made fools out of themselves because they were trying to make biology into a form of metaphysics, and it didn't work. So anytime they would talk about evolution, Dawkins would talk about, Christopher Hitchens would say light-sensitive cells eventually evolved into the eye through natural selection, which means there's no God. But then if you're talking about natural selection that way, then it turns out that is God. Well, that doesn't work, okay? If you go back to those, what you're calling light-sensitive cells, you're seeing kind of sleight of hand here, where Hitchens is, you have to ask him the question, can these light-sensitive cells see? An eye is something that can see. Either these light-sensitive cells can see things, in which case they are already the eye, which now you can't explain it because you're already positing it as the beginning. It's a circular argument. Or they cannot see. If they cannot see, there is no way that natural selection would allow them to develop, because they would have to see to have some type of advantage over things that do not see, and that doesn't work. Dawkins did the same thing with a wing, where he said that 49% of a wing is better than no wing at all, and it talked about gradual increments of the wing. That doesn't work. There is no such thing as gradual increments. Either this, whatever it is, allows you to fly, in which case it's already a wing, or it does not do that, in which case it can't become a wing. This is part of the problem that needs to be exposed here, because Darwinism is probably the main ideological underpinning of oligarchic control in the world, if we're talking about the philosophical basis of it.
My problem with theory of evolution was always that it seemed to me that it purported to be anti-Aristotelian, anti-teleological, at least, not ad nauseam anti-God, but it certainly purported to be anti-teleological or anti-Aristotelian. But they always slide in some Aristotelic new terms or terminology, and they just can't get rid of it. Although they would like to fancy themselves as if they did it.
Everything in nature has a purpose. What Aristotle would call telos. Okay, the jaw has a purpose. If you're talking about logos, the jaw has a form. Aristotle said if the eye were if the eye were if the eye were a body, what would its soul be? What would its form be? Its soul would be seeing. The form of the jaw, the soul of the jaw is chewing. Chewing means you have to have a top jaw and a bottom jaw. Now, that's the way some whales are. Some of the sperm whale, it has to be that. It can't be half a jaw. You can't have half a jaw because it doesn't work. Now, some whales don't have jaws. They have screens. They're baleen whales, and they suck krill in through these screens. That is completely incompatible in terms of telos or design with the other kind of jaw. You can't have a mixture of the two of them. You have to have some type of goal in mind, some type of purpose, and that is something that they simply can't explain.
Is materialism and capitalism and its corrupting influence inherent in the English mind, or merely the result of Jewish Protestant moral inversion? What do you think?
The English mind suffered a trauma during the Reformation. And during this there was no theological justification for the Reformation. It was a looting operation orchestrated by aristocrats who wanted to steal church property. That trauma has effects to this day among the English. It had a devastating effect on the English people because it divided the people into oligarchs, looters, and the people who used to benefit from the church, the normal people. That inversion was codified as capitalism. Capitalism became the religion of England at the time of the Glorious Revolution. It was might have been called Presbyterianism, but the real religion of the English Empire was capitalism. Capitalism is state-sponsored usury. When the Protestant Reformation allowed usury, they sowed the seeds of their own destruction. This came about during the course of the 19th century when the Rothschild, we've already mentioned the Rothschild family, when they showed up, Nathan Rothschild showed up in England. The English won the battle. They defeated Napoleon. They wanted to celebrate, and they all wanted to build big houses to celebrate. And the Rothschilds lent them the money. And over the course of the 19th century, all of the property fell into the hands of the Jews as one aristocrat after another went into debt. The classic example of this would have been the Churchill family. Randolph Churchill died 60,000 pounds in debt to Natty Rothschild. Natty Rothschild forgave the debt, but he took his son, Winston, became a pawn of Jewish interests, and that led to the Balfour Declaration, and that led to the founding of the State of Israel. So if you put all those things together, you have the recipe that destroyed the English mind and allowed for the rise of things like Darwinism.
Is it possible to have a market economy without usury?
Yes, absolutely. Usury kills charity and it kills business. That's what Saint Bernardino of Siena said. It kills charity because you don't want to give, because you don't want to help people out because of your greed, and it kills business because if you can get a return on your investment with no risk, Why would you risk your money to help to invest in a business? Usury, there is no shared risk in a loan. So by eliminating risk, the usurious economy destroys the incentive to invest in productive businesses.
For us in Islam, usury is a big crime or sin. Allah says in the Quran that usury does not help the economy, but it helps like the devil helps the person who is possessed. Now, the question of usury has been a major question for the Muslim world since the era of colonialism, but even after. Because according to Islam, building an economy on usury is a sin. Now, to the question if the economy can be run without usury, the answer is yes. For your viewers, they might know that we in Islam have the concept of the Islamic banking. The concept of Islamic banking is that, let us say you want to buy a property for you, and because nowadays we need the banks in one way or another. And the concept that the Jewish bankers have created in the West, whereby if you have a bank, the bank has to run on usury, has been challenged even in the Eastern Communist bloc when we were part of it, but even in the Islamic countries. And the Muslim countries from Indonesia and Malaysia up to Turkey and Iran have developed the concept of the Islamic banking. So how does it work? Let us say you want to buy a home. In the West, you go and take a mortgage. This mortgage is a way to enslave you for the rest of your life. And moreover, the bankers are very clever manipulators that they will always cheat you, and you will be a slave to the end of your life. For your viewers, to make it simple, how have Islamic scholars have responded to the concept of having a banking system with usury? They have the financing from the banks. So let us say you want to buy an apartment. What we have in many Muslim countries, it is that the bank will be your guarantor. So let us say if your apartment will cost you $10,000, the bank is going to buy it for you, and you are going to pay the loan back to the bank without interest. The bank might charge you more than $10,000. It might charge you, let us say, $12,000 or $15,000, but you will not end into the debt trap and into the usury trap that the banks have. So, yes, an economy can function without the concept of usury. Now, for the people who live in the West, their life is so much connected with the mortgage system and the usury that they cannot even imagine how they can live without it. But I think usury is one of the major traps that the bankers use in order to enslave the people. And in the West, what the bankers have done is that they have, in a way, reinvented the medieval concept of serfdom. In medieval Europe, the serfs, they were slaves to their land up to their death. Nowadays, the bankers in the West, what they're doing is by manipulating the property market, by sending the property market into limit, they're making it impossible for people to buy their own apartments or their own properties. So what has this thing done? This has enslaved the majority of people who live in the West. That they have always to go to the banks to get mortgage in order to buy homes or whatever they need for their life. And this is a new form of enslavement. The usury is being used by these bankers to enslave the citizens of the West, but it is being used even to enslave countries of the third world as well.
A viewer asked me this question twice. I don't know if you know the guy, but I have to ask you, is your opinion, or what are your opinions on Klaus Schwab? Do you know him?
Klaus Schwab just gave a speech, it's on the internet, about the Great Reset, and all of the oligarchs chimed in. Prince Charles was there. He spoke with a distinct German accent, which made him look ludicrous to English-speaking people, especially when he's talking in the interest of these oligarchs and wants you to get on his side and support this plan. It was a complete disaster in terms of public relations and any type of effectiveness, but it did show the hand of what these oligarchs are intending to do, how they're intending to use the COVID crisis as a way of just cracking down on all the things that they don't like, mainly representative government.
Dr. Jones, a viewer wants you to talk about the Lithuanians in Chicago.
Yes. Well, this goes back to, we're talking about white people and black people. Okay, I mentioned the ethnic cleansing of the Catholic neighborhoods that took place in all of the big cities of America during the 1960s, where the blacks became the proxy warriors of the Jews under the Black Jewish Alliance. One of the main battles was Martin Luther King, a proxy warrior of the Jews, who showed up in Chicago and was marched into a neighborhood called Marquette Park. Marquette Park, confrontation, black people on one side of the street, white people on the other, white people throwing rocks. The only difference is they didn't think that they were white. They thought they were Lithuanians. And the whole point of this was identity theft. Basically, the racial narrative was imposed on an ethnic situation, and the Lithuanians were had this white identity imposed upon them. And as soon as that happened, they lost the battle, the public relations battle. What they were saying, in effect, and the old system in Chicago was that Chicago was basically a group of ethnic neighborhoods. Every ethnic group that came over to America settled in its own particular neighborhood because they needed to talk to each other. And I don't speak Lithuanian. Very few people in America spoke Lithuanian. In order to do business, the Lithuanians had to live in their own neighborhood. And then over a period of time, 3 generations, their children would eventually become Americans. I mention this because we're seeing the same identity theft going on right now. Racial conflict is a form of identity theft. As soon as you identify a group as white, they lose because all white people are racist and racism has no rights. This is precisely what's going on. It's in my book, The Slaughter of Cities. I talk about Chicago. I mentioned Marquette Park, but other groups as well, where the Catholics simply had their identity stolen from them by being turned into white people.
Dear gentlemen, got anything to say at the end of our live stream?
Thank you for having me. It was a great conversation. This is what we need. More conversation, less banning on the internet.
It was my pleasure. Olsi?
Thank you very much as well.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you to the viewers for staying with us, and I hope we all see each other again and we don't get banned. Let's have as much similar conversations as we can. Good night, good afternoon, and goodbye.
Thank you.